Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Storytime series. I'm going to be posting more on this channel so I can accrue watch hours. Also, this channel is a good protection just in case anything happens to my big channel. I have other creators that try to get my channel taken down all the time. So if you see me posting more content on here versus my big channel, that's why. But I want to talk about one of the exoticals because she messaged me in the Patreon. By the way, be sure to join the Patreon. That is where we spill the most tea. But she said that I could share this on YouTube. So, the title of her email is Using Men as Protection from Female Jealousy. And I think that that title alone is like a psychological jackpot because when you are considered the desirable one, you're already going to be a target for the pick me's. So the women who are the most male centered, they automatically start gunning for you because you're getting the male gaze. But some women, they don't want to be catty in front of a man because then they will be exposed as being hating ass bitches. So I've actually had this happen to me as well where I might be like in the workplace or maybe like in school or something. And because I have the attention of men, other women will just back off and not mess with me because they don't want to look like they're jealous. So I just thought that this title that she sent for her story time was very interesting, using men as protection from female jealousy. So she says, "Hey Exoticals United, this can be posted on the Patreon and or on YouTube. Get your exotical tax. Can you talk about exoticals who use relationships as protection from female competition and unwanted attention from men versus the exoticals who protect themselves by gaining weight or cutting their hair and downgrading their looks?" Okay, so exoticals who use relationships as protection, I will admit that's a category that I have fallen into when I was younger because everybody knows that when you are considered desirable in the male gaze, whenever you're down and out, there's always some man that wants to come and save you. So I think that part of why we see a lot of exoticals being serial monogamous is because men will offer to help us when we are isolated. Think about how much jealousy you go through. Think about how many women have backstabbed you. Think about how isolating that is. So sometimes when there's an exotical who's kind of like leveled down, or maybe she has no friends, she just moved to a new city, nobody's there for her, maybe her own family was like jealous of her, so she's completely isolated. That is when a lot of men feel the most confident to come in and try to like swoop that woman up because she's more vulnerable. And I feel like for a lot of us exoticals, getting into these relationships can be more tempting just because we are the ones where the men, they typically do tend to spoil us, or they like, regardless of whatever race you date, I can understand why exoticals do end up getting into these relationships as a form of protection. Because a lot of us are so used to people always trying to expose us, always trying to put us down, or like trying to one up us. So I think that sometimes it's kind of like refreshing in a sense to have someone who genuinely wants to help you. Now, I will say most men in general, they do tend to have ulterior motives. But this pretty girl said, "Can you talk about the exoticals who protect themselves with like relationships versus the exoticals who protect themselves by looking bad?" So basically, gaining weight, chopping all their hair off, downgrading their looks. So the women who downgrade their looks, these women thrive on being invisible. So the women who they hide behind their beauty, or they don't really want to flaunt their beauty, um, I would say they're a little bit less relationship oriented, and they're more so like just trying to be humble. It's almost this mindset of, let me humble myself before you can humble me. You already are going to assume I'm conceited because I'm an exotical. You're already going to assume that I think I'm better than you. So let me make sure that my lifestyle is already humbling enough. Let me make sure that my body is humbled. Let me make sure that I look, average or basic, and that will make me less threatening. So I also went through that phase as well. That was more so when I was already in a relationship. So I kind of felt like hiding my beauty, or like not being glamorous, it was a way of showing the world that I'm not an attention seeker, because a lot of people stereotype exoticals as being attention seeking. They stereotype us as always wanting the spotlight, always stealing the spotlight, always hogging up the attention. You know how they say we take over or we outshine people, or like, we always kind of like come into the room and just have all eyes on us. So I think that the exoticals who gain weight, or the ones who look bad on purpose, it's kind of like an easy way out. It's a way of sending the message that, hey, see, look, I'm not really trying hard. I'm not really trying hard. And also, have you ever noticed that monoculturally black exoticals, they will shame the exoticals who were glamorous? That has happened to me before, where there's always some sort of light-skinned black woman who's monoracial who will talk shit because I'm wearing makeup or I'm wearing lashes, or, because I'm more glammed up. So I think that sometimes exoticals who have like this leveled down appearance, I think that part of that is like, she doesn't want to threaten anybody else. She doesn't want to look like she's competing for social status. Because remember, beauty is a form of status. Visibility is a form of status. Visibility is also a form of beauty as well. We can talk about that more in the Patreon. But I think when it comes to the exoticals who are fat, I think that part of that is like, it's using food as a source of comfort for sure, but it's also like you don't want to have to maintain the body type of being thin. I just feel like when you're an exotical, a lot of people are waiting for you to fail. They're waiting for you to gain the weight back. They're waiting for you to level down again. And I think that some exoticals are more sensitive to monitoring spirits. Weight loss attracts monitoring spirits. So I think that's part of why some exoticals are like, fuck it, I'll just not lose weight because, I'm already being monitored enough. I'm already hyper visible. Imagine being hyper visible at 300 pounds. How much more visible would you be if you were 120? So I think that some exoticals, they're exhausted. They don't want to deal with the stress of being even more visible from doing the weight loss. And that's why I talk so much about how, like, if you are losing weight or something, then just don't tell anyone. Like, I didn't tell anyone when I was losing weight. Well, first of all, I didn't even know if I would succeed. So that was the main reason why, because I had failed so many times at weight loss. But yeah, I think those are two separate things. I think that the exoticals who use relationships as their protection, these tend to be exoticals where maybe in the past they've struggled a little bit with codependency just because you've had a lot of people betray you. And by the way, I'm talking about myself as well. I'm not, I'm not like calling out anybody, but I think that there's one type of exotical where she likes the idea of someone coming in to save her, so that's why she's a little bit more vulnerable. Because, imagine being Dusty. Like in my case, when I was Dusty, I actually did have a boyfriend at the time who literally came in and saved me. He helped me to move out of the city that I was in. And basically that relationship at the time, it kind of represented having access to a new lifestyle. A lot of exoticals, we attract men who tend to upgrade our lifestyle in one way or another. And I've noticed that a lot of other women who are not exoticals, they've never experienced that. They have to ask a man like, "Oh, can you pay this bill?" Or like, "Hey, can I have some money? Hey, can you buy me a drink? Hey, can you buy me dinner?" I've never had to explicitly ask a man for money or anything. And I think that for a lot of exoticals who get into relationships, that's the case. It's, she's just kind of minding her business, trying to recover from whatever she's gone through. And then this man comes along, and a lot of us do attract generous men, regardless of what ethnicity he is. And so, yeah, she's like, well, why not? Why wouldn't I go ahead and move in with this guy where he has a nice place to live or whatever? So I think that those are two different things. One type of exotical is she's using self-sabotage as her way of protecting herself. So self-sabotaging is like the weight gain, big chopping her hair. I've never heard any other ethnicity talk about big chopping more than black people. Why is it that in the black community, that's the solution to everything? Oh, just chop your hair off. Just cut everything off. Just start from scratch. That's the most bald-headed community in the United States. Why the fuck would I listen to historically the most bald-headed community in the United States? No shade. Why would I listen to them about growing my own hair? And I think a lot of black hair salons, they project that onto exoticals. And you may not even have the same hair texture. You may not even have the same genetics or the same ancestry, but they'll project onto you and be like, oh, you got a little bit of damage over here, so you might as well just chop off 6 inches. You might as well just chop off everything. And I think that the exoticals who do that, the ones who tend to like hide behind weight gain, or they hide behind their big chop, or they refuse to glamorize themselves, those tend to be the more monoculturally black exoticals. I've never seen a multicultural exotical do that. I've never seen that. I've only seen the exoticals where they grew up in the black community, because I've noticed black people, they tend to shame glamour on light skinned women in particular. If you're light skinned, you're definitely not allowed to wear weaves. You're definitely not allowed to wear wigs. You know, if you're an exotical, if you're already benefiting from an ism, you are absolutely going to get dragged for wearing any sort of enhancement, because, you know, it triggers more jealousy versus the women where they put all these enhancements on just to look average. So you guys have seen my video that I recently posted on here where I talked about optionally chopped. So these women are going from optionally chopped to average when they put all their enhancements on. But if you're an exotical, you're going from already being born pretty to now being stunning and gorgeous and looking like a celebrity. So I think that for the exoticals who refuse to lose weight, or they refuse to like wear makeup or change their hair or whatever, a lot of that is out of guilt. So another thing too is people will try to guilt trip you for utilizing your ambiguity. I told you guys the story about how I never wore any sort of hair highlights at all for a long time because I felt like a sense of guilt. Like, that's denying my blackness. You know, I feel like my hair in particular, having dark hair, that contributes to me like looking more black, if that makes sense. So if I already have light skin and then I have light hair as well, and then I have some freckles as well, I felt like I was crossing over into looking too ambiguous. So it was almost this feeling of kind of like, I'm betraying my blackness, or I'm betraying the black community. Well, who told me that? Where did I get that talking point from? That's a monoculturally black talking point. They want to guilt you out of using your ambiguity. So some of the exoticals where they don't do their hair, or they just chop it all off, or they're just wearing a bonnet 24/7, those exoticals, they don't know how to use their privilege, or they have been shamed out of using their privilege. Usually it's by the black community, because in the black community, they shame people for using privilege. I don't see the white community shaming people for using their privilege. They embrace using their privilege in the white community. That's one of the top social climbing communities in the world, is the white community. So that's how I know that the women who they don't use any of their privileges, pretty hair privilege, pretty face privilege, pretty body privilege, that's how I know they're monoculturally black, because in the black community, they call people sellouts. They call people sellouts. They'll say things like, you forgot where you come from. Or they'll say things like, you're trying to be white. You're just trying to look white. You're just trying to look biracial. I notice they will say this to light-skinned black women in particular. If you're monoracial and you're benefiting from an ism, and then let's say you put on a lace front and it's like blonde, they'll say something like, oh, you're just trying to look mixed. You're just trying to look biracial. Well, why are they saying that? Well, it's because they want you to feel guilty. They want you to stop doing it. They want you to stop looking biracial. That's exactly why they're calling it out. So I think that's two different types of psychology there. So for this exotical who said, you know, what's the difference between the exoticals who use relationships as their protection versus the exoticals who use weight gain or looking bad as their protection? So whichever one makes you more vulnerable. For the ones who use relationships, being single makes them more vulnerable. For the ones who use weight gain and stuff, looking good makes them more vulnerable. So I think it depends on your stage of life. I've noticed that the more independent exoticals tend to be more vulnerable when they're single. So myself included, I can use myself as an example. I don't live in my hometown. I don't have any family here. I'm by myself. So I have moved out of my hometown. I've moved out of my home state. I've traveled and stuff. Like, I've lived in all these different places. So I don't have that anchor or that emotional support that other women would have, where, you know, they can just go back to mommy and daddy. I can't go back to mommy and daddy. If I get stranded at 2 a.m. in the train station, which has happened before, if I get stranded at 2 a.m. or I run out of money, I'm on my own. I can't call my dad to come pick me up. So I think that for the exoticals who are similar to me in that way, where you left the house when you were 18, you know, you went off to college, you have a lot of independence. I think for us, being single can cause a sense of vulnerability sometimes, especially when we're younger. So like when I was maybe in my early 20, 19, 20 years old. That was when I was a little bit more irresponsible. So I used to have scenarios like that where I got stranded in a train station and then, I had no money or whatever. And then there happened to be a guy in the train station. I don't know if I talked about this on YouTube before, but like there happened to be a man in the train station. He had a huge wad of money in his hand. I don't know what he was doing for a living, but he just happened to have a huge wad of money and he was like, "You need some money?" And I was so scared. But I just feel like if you're one of those exoticals who's very independent, so maybe you're out by yourself, you're living in a new city by yourself, you moved out of your home state, maybe you had a toxic family, maybe you had to cut them off. I think that those types of exoticals tend to be the ones where being single can be more of a trigger, or maybe like being in a relationship can be more appealing. So I won't call being single a trigger for them. I'll just say that being in a relationship can be more it can be more helpful because you have someone to call, you have someone to pick you up, you have maybe somebody giving you money, or maybe they're giving you resources. They give you access to certain jobs, or maybe they connect you to certain people. Um, so I would say that's the psychology behind the exoticals, where sometimes you'll see them being kind of like a serial monogamous. If somebody's a serial monogamous, it's because they are benefiting from it. And again, speaking from experience here, being a serial monogamist has benefited me in the past. That's why I did it. And I didn't do it on purpose. I've never met somebody who is in a bunch of relationships and they purposely did it. No, you don't purposely do it. It's just more so like it's appealing because if you're isolated already, or maybe for whatever reason you don't have any friends, your girlfriends ditched you or something, or maybe you didn't get along with them, having somebody come in and then just kind of make your life easier, I can see why some women would fall for that. And then in terms of the women where they chop off their hair, I will be honest, I think that doing things like chopping off your hair and gaining weight, I do think you're worse off. And again, I'm speaking from experience. I've been both. I've dealt with both of these. I've been the exotical who was kind of a serial monogamous, or going from relationship to relationship. I've done that before. And then I've also been the level down exotical as well, where my body looks bad, my skin looks bad, hair looks bad. And I will tell you that the one time that I was actually the most depressed, it was when I had gained weight. My hair, I wasn't taking care of my hair or my skin, my teeth, like nothing. I wasn't taking care of anything. So I will say, if you are an exotical watching this and you're going through this phase where maybe you're hiding behind your own beauty, or you're not expressing your beauty, I think that that's actually dangerous. You guys know that I have very controversial beliefs. I believe that not being beautiful is a depression trigger. So I will never recommend to any woman to not be beautiful. And by the way, I'm not saying that if you're fat or if you're bald headed or whatever, that you're not beautiful. But I am saying that if you don't meet your own internalized beauty standard, that's a depression trigger. It is. And you can't convince me otherwise because I've experienced it myself. So like in my case, when I was bad bodied, I was more jealous. I was more triggered. I definitely felt more, I felt more triggered by things like girls having pretty pictures on Instagram or something. That was when I was more of a hater. It was when I was not taking care of my own beauty. Being single never did that. Like I've never been depressed or something because I was single. I would say that when I would go through breakups in my 20s and stuff, yes, it would be very inconvenient to have to move out, for example, or if somebody paid my rent, and now I don't have a way to pay my rent because I just moved to the city and I don't have a job yet. That part is stressful. Not so much the breakup part. It's more so the logistical side, but nothing in my life has ever been more stressful than looking like shit and treating my body like shit. But this pretty girl said, also, I mentioned later in this email about how there's a difference between MLS girls' adultification versus unambiguous girls' adultification. We are both targets, but do you see a difference? So, adultification is when you treat a child like they're an adult. And yes, I do believe there's a difference. So, for example, the MLS little girls who get treated like adults, oftentimes we get sexualized. And it's not the same as unambiguous women. It's not, because unambiguous women deal with the isms. They're fighting against colorism, texturism, and featureism. If you are considered an exotical, it's the exact opposite. You're benefiting from one or more ism. So I feel like something that can happen is being bullied by adults. Like, for example, being a little exotical, being told by adults that you're going to be a problem when you grow up, or you're going to be trouble when you grow up, or having adults trying to humble you in terms of your looks already when you're a little girl because they think you're going to be conceited when you become an adult. Unambiguous children, sometimes adults humble their looks because those adults genuinely believe that that girl is ugly. So that's a totally different scenario. That's straight up anti-blackness that the unambiguous women are dealing with. Like, oh, my mom called me ugly. Well, yeah, that's because she genuinely believed you were ugly, versus a lot of MLS little girls where it's the exact opposite. The adult doesn't believe that you're ugly, but she wants you to believe that you're ugly. So both of those things are a form of trauma, but it's different. Like there's a different motive. I think that MLS children can deal with a lot of jealousy from adults. I've seen this actually. One girl, I recently cut off a girl actually. I cut her off. This is a couple years ago. She was an unambiguous woman, and she had a son who was mixed. He looked like how Corbin Blue looks. So he had kind of this light skin tone with that hair, that same type of hair. And she was so rude to him. She was constantly humbling her son, constantly saying things like, oh, why are you trying to use your looks to get some free candy? Oh, those girls are flirting with you at the candy shop. Because, like, little teenage girls, whenever she would take him out or whatever, little girls would be like, oh, he's so cute. You know, they would kind of fangirl over him. And she would try to humble him. And she tried to convince her own son that he's unattractive or that, like, he's not all that. So basically, she was systematically destroying this kid's self esteem. When in reality, she knew that her son is handsome and, you know, he's got things going for him. So I think that when it comes to how MLS children are treated versus unambiguous children, there is a difference because a lot of us MLS children, we get both sides of the coin. We get the pedestalization and we also get the suffering as well. I think with unambiguous people, they just get the suffering. There is no pedestalization in there. And I think that's why sometimes you see more unambiguous women who grow up and then they get excited about being sexualized. Like the video that I showed you guys on my Exoticals United channel, where I showed the woman celebrating being essayed. Why the fuck would you celebrate being essayed by a non black person? You know, like, I think there's more validation starvation. I think that's one of the core wounds of a lot of unambiguous children, being validation starved. We see this a lot with black men as well, even with the men, you know, the unambiguous women and the unambiguous men, you see a lot of them being validation starved. They didn't get told they were pretty. They didn't get told, oh, you're so gorgeous, you're so attractive, you're so handsome. Versus MLS children, we have this, it's like this mentally ill experience. Because I can speak from experience here. In my case, I had adults all the time. They would be like, oh my God, you're so gorgeous. Oh my God, your daughter's hair is so beautiful. Oh my God, look at her hair. Oh, look at her face. Look at her skin. Oh, you have the perfect complexion. So I had this experience where there were adults kind of pedestalizing me, but then I also had experiences where there were adults or children trying to convince me that I was ugly. So it's more like you get two different types of bullying, I guess, or you just get two different experiences. We have a love-hate relationship in the black community, whereas a lot of unambiguous people just have straight up hatred. It's just a straight up anti-blackness that's there. And that's why you see more unambiguous people talking about divesting. Well, why would you want to divest? Well, it's because your own community, they treated you like shit. That's why. I don't see MLS people constantly talking about divesting. Why? Well, it's because we received a pedestal in the black community as well. So I think that's one of the main differences between little MLS girls versus little unambiguous dark-skinned black girls. Also, the projection of insecurities, I've noticed, it seems to be worse with the unambiguous girls. For example, with their hair. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many light-skinned women I see with their type 4 hair all the time. I see more light-skinned women or biracial women wearing their 4C hair, wearing locks, wearing braids or whatever, versus unambiguous dark-skinned women. And I feel like it's because the little dark-skinned girls, the little dark-skinned black girls, a lot of their mothers have a fear of their little girls being bullied, or they kind of, it's almost like they regret having them. I know it sounds very fucked up, but I have noticed this toxic dynamic with black mothers and black daughters where you'll see the dark-skinned black mother and she gets frustrated that her dark-skinned black daughter looks the way she does. So that's an experience that we can't really relate to as much as MLS women, because in our case, a lot of times people have gone out of their way to create us. People will get pregnant by somebody on purpose so they can create us and have babies that look like us. So I think that's a totally different experience as well. Um, and I think that part of the adultification for unambiguous female children is kind of expecting them to be perfect, or like expecting them to have their hair perfectly laid all the time. I see more pressure with unambiguous dark skinned black women. MLS little girls, nope. You can have frizzy hair, you're still cute. You could have 4C hair, you're still cute. You could have nappy edges or whatever, hair breakage, you're still cute. Versus the unambiguous daughters, where sometimes their own mothers will like give them whoopings and stuff because they'll be like, oh, why'd you mess up your hair? Or like, why'd you let your hair get frizzy? It's almost as if some unambiguous mothers are embarrassed of their unambiguous daughters. A lot of people won't admit that your children and how they look or who you have children with, people judge you based off that. So a lot of people are embarrassed because they're like, oh, okay, so she's the type that gets pregnant by black men. You know, she's the type that gets pregnant by unambiguous dark skinned black men. Just like how they do the same thing with like white women who get pregnant by black men, they do the same thing with the women as well. They can tell who that woman got pregnant by based on how her daughter looks. But yeah, I just feel like a lot of unambiguous little girls, they tend to grow up with more of a fear of embarrassment. I've noticed a lot of them have a lot more rejection sensitivity because they experience more rejection. You're literally going through the isms versus somebody who's an exotical. You're not going through all three isms at the same time. You don't have all three things working against you at the same time. And then don't even get me started on geographical location and then like where they grew up, because depending on where they grew up, it could be better for them or it can be worse. But going back to the email, this pretty girl said, boy, oh boy, I don't know where to start. I think I'll start with my phenotypes and lookalikes. I've gotten Lauren London the most. It really depends on how I style my hair. If I wear my curls and minimal makeup, Janae Aiko, middle part, I would get Lauren London. I get mistaken for Afro-Latina like Dominican, Brazilian, and sometimes Blasian, so I would say I am not half white by racial passing. Very few people mistake me for half white, if any at all, but most people think I'm not just black because of my features, hair, and skin tone. I have a rose gold skin tone and I have always been slim to curvy and have been blessed with an hourglass figure. Thanks to your channel, I went from a size 10 to a size 4. Side note, you are right about how hourglasses need to get down to a size small to get the most out of your shape. I will start with middle school. I remember we were taking an overnight field trip. Yes, you heard that right. A co-ed 6th grade camping trip. I grew up in SoCal. What can I say? Okay, context here. California is 96% non-black. So I just want to put that out there. All the people, all the unambiguous black people who come on my channel all the time, and then they say, oh, you should just move to LA. Oh, you should do this. California is 96% non-black. Just want to put that out there. And generally speaking, on the West Coast, if there are a lot of black people, they do tend to be in the ghettos, especially if they're African American. I'm not talking about immigrant black people, but African Americans, yes. But this girl says, I grew up in SoCal. What can I say? I was so excited and relieved that some of the chaperones were moms, as my mom couldn't come. Well, first night, myself and 2 other girls were profiled as being fast, and we were moved into the chaperone cabins because they needed to keep an eye on us. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. People, they assume that you're fast because you're desirable. That's 100% what it is. If you're a little MLS girl, I mean, I've never seen it any other way. They assume you're fast because maybe they see the boys in the class fiending over you. They notice that the boys in the class all have a crush on you. They notice that a lot of the boys are giving you attention, or they assume that because you look like Lauren London or whoever, that you must get a lot of male attention. That's just a stereotype that a lot of us have been dealing with since childhood. And it's like, okay, is she fast or are you just sexualizing her? is she fast or is she just pretty? Because that's a lot of people, they call you fast when you're literally just pretty. Like, remember the singer Aaliyah? I remember back in my day when Aaliyah was alive, a lot of people would say that she was fast. Like, oh, that fast little girl. And it's like, okay, well, why are you saying she's fat? She's just pretty. That's not being fast. It's not like she's directly trying to sexualize herself. Why are you accusing her of being fast and then you're not saying the same thing about people like Britney Spears, who's, they're wearing way less clothing. But this girl says, maybe a video discussion on the adultification of MLS versus unambiguous women, because there's a difference. And we both get sexualized young. Yeah, I think that the difference is that unambiguous girls are sexualized, whereas MLS girls, we get sexualized and pedestalized. So that's two different problems that we have versus their one problem. They don't have the pedestalization. I feel like when you are pedestalized, people expect you to live up to that pedestal. So that's a pressure that is placed on MLS women. It's not placed on unambiguous women. With unambiguous women, it's more so like you kind of have to prove, you kind of have to earn your keep or whatever, but a lot of people don't expect much out of somebody unambiguous, just based on their own talking points. That's literally what they say is, they don't expect them to be pretty, or they don't expect them to be popular. They don't expect whatever. For us, it's the exact opposite. So we're dealing with the sexualization, and then we're also dealing with the pedestalization. And by the way, I've talked about this on my channel before. From the time I was in first grade, there was always somebody telling me who I should date when I got older. There was always an adult randomly inserting themselves into my non-existent dating life in elementary school. There would be adults telling me, you should marry a black man when you get older. You should marry a Chinese boy when you get older. It depended on like the ethnicity of the person speaking. But generally speaking, whatever ethnicity that adult was, they would tell me that I should get with somebody of that ethnicity when I'm older. Why are adults worried about the dating lives of little first graders or little, high schoolers? I just think that's crazy. And I think that's an experience that MLS women have that unambiguous women don't have, because according to their own talking points, they didn't have a childhood where they were pedestalized by adults. So I think it's different, because with MLS women, we get pedestalized by adults from the time we are little. People will be asking us, oh my gosh, how did you get your hair so long? What is your mom putting in your hair? What kind of secrets, what beauty secrets do they have in your family that they're using? Because I wish I could get my daughter's hair like yours. Or like, as MLS people, we have a lot of adults who have compared their children to us. So we are the standard of childhood. Just like how I said, we're the standard of living. So that's happened to me before as well, where when I was a child, there would be adults. So maybe it's like my friend's parent or something. They'll be like, oh, why can't you be more like Exoticals United? Well, I'm trying to get your hair to look like Exoticals United's hair. Or I'm trying to get you to have the same style that Exoticals United has. So sometimes I think other women have resentment against us because their parents have made us the standard of living. So that's another thing that proves my talking point. Exoticals are the standard of living, because if you go on unambiguous women's channels, they will tell stories of how their light-skinned sister was always praised, or, they got pressured to look like their light-skinned sister. They got pressured to have the same popularity or the same social status as their light-skinned sisters. So we are the standard of living then, just like I said. That's adults that are enforcing that from the time we were children. So that's another thing that I think is interesting. A lot of people put pressure on us from the time we're children. They put pressure on us to be a success. It's more shocking when you're an MLS woman who fails at something. And a lot of us can attest to that. I mean, I know in my case, I definitely never felt like failure was an option for me. And I'm not saying it towards my parents or anything, but I'm just saying in general. Like in school, people would stereotype me as being smart. I mean, I think I'm a smart girl, but I don't think I'm like a freaking genius or anything. But like teachers, sometimes adults would put me on a pedestal above the unambiguous dark-skinned black children that were in the room. And, they could have been just as smart as me. They could have been just as talented or even more so. But I was the one, quote unquote, soaking up the attention. So I think that's another difference that we experienced as children versus unambiguous women. We have this expectation of success that is placed on us. There's an expectation of success. And that's still true to this day, because even if you look at the celebrities and stuff, who are most of the celebrity content, like who are most of those YouTube channels focused on? Light-skinned women, mixed women, biracial women. It's the dark-skinned women who benefit from texturism, the dark-skinned women who benefit from featurism. They're not studying what Gabby Sidibe is doing. They're not watching her every move. They don't care who she dates or who she marries. They're not digging into the details of who her boyfriend is. They're not studying that. So I feel like for a lot of MLS children, we grow up with this subconscious message where it's like, okay, you already meet a beauty standard, so now let's see how many other standards you can meet as well. And then sometimes we might have adults around us who try to exploit us or something. You know, that happens all the time, where sometimes the parent will sign that child up for pageants and modeling and singing and whatever. And what if the child doesn't want to do that? I don't know. What if the child is just not really interested in that? So it's almost like we're forced into this position of being the talented 10th of the Black community. We're forced into this position of being the beauty standard of the Black community. And we are even the standard of Blackness as well. Light-skinned women are the standard of Blackness, because a lot of them don't want to show actual unambiguous dark-skinned women. So that's a whole other thing. But this pretty girl says, middle school is when I noticed I was not average or overlooked. In high school, I went to a primarily white high school, but I got attention from both white and Black boys, stayed with a date or boyfriend. Although my parents were religious, I was allowed to date in high school, and I have so many story times about my experiences, but again, I may have to share these one day and get this off my chest. I also want to talk about dating experiences. Most MLS women do tend to have more dating experience than unambiguous women, just based on their talking points, based on my own observation. And that's because from the time we're children, we've already got adults talking to us about dating. We've already got adults giving us advice on dating, just randomly. Random unsolicited advice. And it's like, how do you know that this little girl even wants to date men? You know, some women are gay or whatever, or they just don't want to date. They're just asexual, or they just, they're not interested. But I've noticed that as MLS children, a lot of adults, they're talking to us about dating from the time we're young. Sometimes they're talking to us about dating strategies. And I'm not talking about just parents, because it could be people at church. It could be people at your school. It could be teachers. It could be older sisters, cousins, etc. Dating is always, you're socialized to like be in the dating market. If you're a little MLS girl, you're literally socialized and primed and prepped to be in the dating market. And you are told from childhood that you are desirable in the dating market, whether it's by adults or it could be by children. It could be by little boys. Little boys are already asking you, will you be my girlfriend? You're in first grade or some shit. Or like, I remember in my case, sometimes the older sisters of little boys in the class, they'd be like, oh, there's your crush. Oh, my little brother has a crush on you. And it's like, I'm in first grade. I don't even know hardly what that means. So I think that a lot of MLS women, we have a totally different childhood experience. We have a different middle school and high school experience. And I would say that if you're an MLS woman watching this and you feel like you relate more to unambiguous women, this is probably not the channel for you. This channel is for people that can relate to what I'm saying. But I think that that's another trauma, though, that unambiguous women have. It's this trauma of feeling like they missed out. Feeling like they missed out on teenage love, or they missed out on getting asked to prom, or, because if you watch their videos, that's literally what they'll talk about. They'll say, I never got asked to prom, or I asked a boy to the Sadie Hawkins dance or Tolo. I don't know what they call the school dances, but they'll be like, oh, I asked a boy to the dance and he said no, or I've never had a Valentine before. All of those things, all of that FOMO, MLS women don't experience that as much. We don't. Because adults will even try to hook us up with their sons, or they'll be like, oh, my friend has a little son and, maybe we can go on a play date. That's another thing as well. When you're a little MLS girl, you've got the parents trying to put you on play dates with their friend's son, or, they try to say like, oh, this is your crush, or they like, I don't know, they just socialize you to be desirable. They socialize you from childhood to know that you are desirable. And if you had a jealous mother, the jealous mother does not have as much of an effect on an MLS woman as an unambiguous woman. I said what I said. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you're an MLS woman, even if you have a terrible mother and father, when you leave the house, you're still getting validated. Unambiguous women do not have that same luxury. So I'm never going to sit here and pretend like we have the same experiences. We don't. But this pretty girl says, to sum it up, I went to prom about 6 times with 4 different dates, and I wasn't lacking in attention. Any male friend I had would eventually confess their attraction, and I was invited to parties and had an overall good experience. Again, I wouldn't consider myself to have been the beauty standard. Hold on, I lost my place. She said, I wouldn't consider myself to have been the beauty standard, but I had a variety of guys interested or showing interest. Oh, that's another experience I've noticed as well that most MLS women have. We already have the experience of white men having been attracted to us, or Asian or Hispanic or whatever. I feel like with a lot of unambiguous women, the non-black community is still mystified. They don't have as much validation from white people or from Asian people or whatever. If you're MLS, you are getting white validation. I said what I said. Hollywood is owned by white people. The music industry is owned by white people. And what image do they push the most? It's MLS women above unambiguous women. And if you don't believe me, just go watch channels like Chrissy or Myoa's World, and you'll hear them admit to this as well. So yeah, I think that's another difference that we have is having a variety of validation. So on my other channel on Exoticals United, I've talked about having multiple sources of micro validation. And I feel like as children, we had multiple sources of micro validation. So that's why sometimes, like, even if you hear that an MLS woman had bad parents, her bad parent never stopped her as much as the unambiguous woman's bad parents. Because think about it, for a lot of unambiguous people, the only validation and kind of the main validation that they need is in the home, because they're not getting as much outside of the home. They're not getting as much from black media. But going back to this girl's email, she says, nothing prepared me for going to college, and I chose an HBCU on the East Coast. So as an exotical, you can imagine the chaos. Now remember, I was an MLS girl in a white high school, so I didn't know much about going to an environment where I was consistently the beauty standard. I had a lot of the typical experiences: jealousy, negging, attention, adoration, gifts, invitations to parties, and opportunities for experiences where I could be visible. When I first got to university, I had my natural hair, which was black girl long at the time, past my shoulders around bra strap length. No one knew this because I primarily wore it curly, 3C and 4A, so I get both intrigue and fascination, especially when I styled it. There was another girl who did hair on my dorm floor and offered to straighten it for me for free. She was a bit blunt about it, but I was more of a people pleaser back then. Everyone was in love with how long and healthy looking it was, and because I had texture, thickness, and blonde highlights at the time, it was clearly not weave, so I naturally stood out in a crowd of relaxed and Indian Remy hair. Oh yeah, I've talked about that on the Patreon before when I was doing my people watching. I went to, I think it was like some sort of black festival or something. And most of the girls had black straight hair. Generally speaking, that's what they have in the black community. That's kind of their standard hairstyle. I don't know why that is. I don't know if they're trying to get the male gaze, but that is their standard of beauty. Pretty much whatever you see a woman wearing, that's her standard of beauty. Okay, so however she does her hair, that's her standard of beauty for hair. However she does her makeup, that's her standard of beauty for makeup. But this girl says, I used to love Indian Remy later on in my college years, and I find that being lighter skinned does help me bypass most texturism. Most people don't care if I wear weave, as my natural hair is long, thick, and healthy. But let's continue with the story time. Oh, by the way, that's another jealousy trigger as well. Having long hair and you can wear the weave, and then the weave doesn't break off your hair, and like you can take out the weave and then your hair is down your back. That's another jealousy trigger that I've noticed. But this girl says, I got a lot of compliments, opportunities, and invites, especially for someone who was not extroverted or super outgoing. I'm an INFJ and enjoy observing, but generally do not approach people. When people approach me, I have been told I have an intense stare or siren eyes. Back then, I repressed this and would often get anxious or nervous around men and with women. I would use self-depreciation or downplay my looks and talents so they could shine. I still struggle with this with female friendships. But I had plenty of chances to make friendships. Just about every night, someone would invite me to a kickback or party, and as a sheltered Christian for most of my life, I was definitely outside. Every Friday in the main hall, the fraternities and sororities would line dance or step to music. It was a great and entertaining place to people watch and be a creepyotical. My first time at an event, one of the frat boys picked me up. Oh, I guarantee you it was a cue. She said, one of the frat boys picked me up while I was dancing with my friends and attempted to perform an act on me in the middle of the event. Yeah, so for those of you who didn't go to an HBCU, the Q dogs, they're known for like eating women out and like, I don't know if I can even say that on here, but they're known for doing stuff like that and picking up women. But she's saying that when she was just standing there, a man from the fraternity picked her up and basically did the gesture of him eating her cat. And she said, so yeah, basically I was assaulted. I left after that in introverted embarrassment, and my friends thought it was flattering because he was buff, popular, attractive, and in a fraternity. So yeah, that's a sign of validation starvation. If she thinks that being SA'd, if these black unambiguous women are thinking that being SA'd at a party is like attractive, like, oh my God, he acted like he was eating your cat. Oh wow, that's so flattering. Yeah, they're validation starved. So for them, sexual validation is still better than no validation. That's why a lot of them are desperate. It's very similar to the incel men, where they're just desperate to have sex. They're just desperate to be so desirable that someone wants to sleep with them. But this girl says, when I said I wasn't interested in him and he wasn't my type, they then roasted the way I would dance, pretending to dance the way I do because I don't twerk in front of people. Later, they would joke about how I would talk, Valley Girl accent, as I was from SoCal. I wish I had embraced the stuck-up, bougie, pretty Valley Girl stereotype they casted on me. This was not an isolated event. Going out, I was always the one that was approached or talked to, and the girls I was cool with, unfortunately, didn't want to hang out with me after a while. Yeah, I've noticed in the black community, a lot of them will say that they don't want to go out with women who they think are more desirable than them because, it's kind of like a bruise to their ego, I guess, if you get approached and they don't. Be sure to check out my video about that on Exoticals United. But she said, they confronted me in the dorm room one afternoon and made it clear that they were disinterested in hanging out with me because I would soak up the attention at parties and places where the male gaze was present. But when you're attractive, it's not just men. Something people don't realize when you're attractive is that you even attract women. I had both men and even women making passes on me. I didn't even know they were curious, and some confessed that they weren't, but were interested in experimenting with me. So college was wild, but I was looking forward to having a group of friends that weren't using me for male attention or parties and weren't secretly in competition with me. And by the way, I want to talk about the lesbian thing too. Something I've noticed is some women who are secretly gay or, it's almost this mindset where it's like, if I can't be you, I want to sleep with you. I've noticed there are some women like that as well, where maybe they are secretly bi-curious or whatever. And so sometimes they will antagonize you as the exotical, but in reality, they like have a crush on you or something, or, they secretly want to sleep with you because it makes them feel validated to know that the pretty girl, she kissed me, or, the pretty girl slept with me. But this girl says, after about 2 months or so of nonstop going out, I wanted to start getting serious about school. I had an upper-class man who wanted me to join the fashion show and would try to recruit me to be an AKA. So that's the sorority, by the way. She was beautiful and in shape and unambiguous, and I thought we were going to hit it off. But our friendship ended after an incident at a small get-together one evening. She invited me to a small group kickback with other athletes and AKAs. It was a chance for me to people please and perform, looking back at it. While I was there, a dusty, unambiguous football player took an interest in me, and he was in my face the entire time, even though I was trying to include everyone in the conversation. Turns out her friend, who was also an AKA, was dating him. These Negroes are not loyal, and she didn't invite me out after that. I didn't do anything with him that night, but someone started a rumor that I slept with the entire football team not long after. To this day, I don't know who started that awful rumor. When you're a pretty girl, you're never alone because there's always someone in your business. Yes, pretty women get treated like celebrities. So people love you, they admire you, but they also hate you, and they speculate about you, and they try to figure out your beauty, and they take secret pictures of you, and they save your social media posts and stuff. It's because you're a celebrity. That's why. Um, but this pretty girl says, but not all of it was bad. I had some guys that wanted to actually get to know me, and I learned to spot the difference between someone who is interested in my looks versus getting to know me. So that's another thing, too. I think that one of the differences with us versus a lot of unambiguous women is even though a lot of us talk our shit online and we say things like, oh my god, we get essayed, and we have all bad experiences, a lot of us also have a lot of good experiences as well. So I think that we talk about the bad side of pretty privilege, but a lot of us, we don't tend to talk about the privileges that we have, like with men or with in terms of money or opportunities or visibility. We don't tend to talk about that because it's improper. It's politically incorrect. It comes off as bragging to say things like, "Oh, I also had guys who wanted to get to know me, and they were actually genuine, and I had a good time." You can't even say stuff like that around women who can't relate. And so that's why I tell the exoticals, never tell women, just don't tell them anything, especially about something like dating, because a lot of them are obsessed with dating. So just don't tell them anything about your dating life. Only tell them the negative stuff. Don't tell them anything positive, like, oh my God, everything's going well. I really like this guy. Don't do that. But this pretty girl says, one day, after coming back to my dorm room, I had a hand-painted portrait of my social media profile picture. I had no idea who it was until someone from my dorm told me it was an MLS baseball player with light eyes and a brown skin tone. We were not friends, and we only would see each other in class that we had together. I thought it was quite a gesture back then, and thanked him. He was very handsome and low-key, just what I needed. And that's when I realized that I could use men during this time to shield me from female competition. I would be less of a threat if I was in a relationship. There wouldn't be a reason to not want to be my friend if I already had a boyfriend. Turns out I enjoyed his company. I spent more time with him as he had his own apartment where the athletes got to stay. As an introvert, it's nice to have someone you can trust, and unfortunately I couldn't build that relationship with women during that time. The guys on campus eventually found out about our relationship, and the attention slowed down, which is what I wanted. If I encountered any unwanted attention or jealousy, I could just say I was in a relationship and not interested. Eventually, I found other girlfriends that went to a neighboring PWI, and I would spend most of my time with them or my baseball boo. But I may have to make a separate story time about him because being in a relationship can shield you from female competition, but that man can become possessive of you. Stay tuned for that. This was a pattern that would continue for me throughout my adult life. And I would love to hear your thoughts on decentering men from this mindset. I don't know exactly how to exist where, even still to this day. I experience female competition with the male gaze. Do you just accept that women may not like you? Yes, I accept that women may not like me. Also, I don't hang out with male-centered women. So I only hang out with women who have decentered men or women who are just, they're not interested in dating. Also, the whole male gaze competition thing, sometimes that also comes from those women having the same type as you. So, maybe you're both into white guys or something, and that's why I say, don't tell women your type. Don't tell them your type. Don't tell them your preference. Let them think they know everything about you when they actually don't. That's another protection mechanism that I've used on myself. I don't tell people shit. In fact, I will even I will tell my friends, I don't want to talk about men. That's part of my boundary. I don't talk about men. I don't talk about dating. If I am with someone and we're already boyfriend, girlfriend or something, then maybe I'll talk about it. But other than that, I don't need to talk about it. So setting boundaries with your female friends can also help as well. Um, but this girl says, I just want to thank you again. You are guiding so many of us, and I want to create my own channel to share many story times because I have so many. It is also helping me practice my writing skills, and it's nice to get this off my chest. And by the way, that was not her only email. But I want to talk about how she said that she felt like having a boyfriend protected her because she's no longer competition and, she doesn't have to deal with as much drama. I felt the same way actually when I was in college. I had a boyfriend maybe 2 years, maybe 2 out of 4 years of college. And I remember at that time thinking, oh, it's good that I have a boyfriend because it's less drama. I'm not going to a bunch of parties. I don't have girls threatening to beat my ass all the time. I don't have to deal with as many rumors because I'm more socially isolated. Sometimes when you're in a relationship, you're just not outside as much. You're not interacting with as many people, and so you don't have as much drama because you've literally, you're not going out in the world as much. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.